Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much to everybody for joining us here this evening to catch up on where we are with the launch of a national elimination program for BVD in England. As Stephen said, we want to do this without delay because there are only 23 days left before BVD Free England launches. So the planned date for the launch of BVD Free England is the 1st of July 2016. And tonight we just want to give you a quick overview of what the national BVD program will be like when it goes live. But just a little background to begin with. The Cattle Health and Welfare Group identified BVD as a priority for the cattle industry some time ago, 2010, 2011, and set up a BVD scientific and technical group that was headed up by Joe Brownlee and Richard Booth, and a BVD stakeholder group that was chaired by Bill Miller. At a stakeholder group meeting in December 2014, the recommendation was passed to the Cattle Health and Welfare Group that we should move forward with a national elimination scheme for BVD in England, and an outline template was provided. In parallel, a BVD Statement of Intent was published on March the 28th, 2014 in the Farmers Weekly by AHDB, NFU, BCVA, Livestock Auctioneers Association, National Beef Association, and Holstein UK. And basically, that statement said that they fully backed the eradication of BVD from the national cattle herd. And that statement of intent had the full support of Nigel Gibbons, the UK Chief Veterinary Officer. An implementation group to develop a scheme to put the ideas into practice was set up in July 2015 with the original 6 signatories to the Statement of Intent as members of that group. And I'm very grateful to all of the members of that group for their support in getting us to where we are today. We had a stakeholder workshop, a very successful stakeholder workshop in February in London, where over 40 people attended, and they basically said, well, where have you got to? We were hoping that you'd have something in place by the end of 2015, and we want to see a BVD-free program in place as soon as possible, and ideally by July this year. So we took our lead from them, and we have opened up the Statement of Intent from those first 6 signatories to any organisation who backs the eradication of BVD from the national cattle herd. And over 70 organisations have now signed. And if you happen to be from an organisation whose logo you can't see on the screen, it's just we simply can't fit them all in at the moment. So there are far more than are on the screen at the moment. And it's really great to have that sort of level of support of people saying, you know, this is the time that we need to get on and eliminate BVD. We as a generation have sat around for long enough on our hands. We could have done this 20 years ago, but at least we're getting on and we're starting on to do that from the 1st of July. And part of the reason for that is that as an industry, we are competing against other countries that have already taken this important step and have started eliminating or have eliminated BVD from their national cattle herds and are reaping the benefits of the improved production as a result. So the Scandinavian countries, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Ireland, and Belgium have all made BVD notifiable disease. And in Scandinavia, the virus has actually already been eliminated. Many of you will be aware that Scotland started its national BVD eradication program in 2011, and it became compulsory in 2013. Ireland and Northern Ireland, our other 2 closest neighbours, also have compulsory BVD eradication programs, and the Netherlands has announced plans to launch a compulsory IBR and BVD control program in 2017. It's also an objective in the US and in New Zealand to move towards BVD eradication. And many other countries have regional BVD control and eradication programs. Even the World Office of Animal Health, the OIE, has listed BVD as a priority disease in terms of animal trade. So the challenge is there to us. Do we want to fall behind the rest of the world? We're all very proud of the fact that livestock production in the UK is recognised as being among the best in the world. And we need to make sure that we eliminate BVD to maintain that status and to stay up there with the best. And it also means that when we go through very challenging times, as we are going through with the dairy industry at the moment, that at least the impact on our cost of production that is BVD will no longer be an issue for the next generation of dairy farmers, and because the next generation of cattle will have come through free of BVD virus. And we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. There have been numerous schemes already in operation, and many of the beef breed societies have said, well, we've been waiting for you to get on and do this for years. Where have you been? Catch up. So the Czechs health schemes are a core group who are already accredited free of BVD, those who are participating in the BVD elements of those schemes. There's also been initiatives through My Healthy Herd and BVD Check with tag and test, the BVD Check with its tag and test database, and a number of other private practices have had their own internal BVD elimination schemes and have worked hard with their clients to get free of BVD and to get that drag on their production efficiency off their back. A number of the supply chains, Waitrose and the cooperative, are also moving towards working on BVD, and as I said, many of the beef breed societies already have BVD requirements in place. And a lot of these schemes follow the Czechs principles, and the BVD free scheme for England is also very heavily based on what's been happening in Czechs and what's been happening in Scotland. In Wales, there are also plans for a BVD elimination programme so that we can move towards a situation where the islands of Great Britain and Ireland are free of BVD as soon as is practical. There's also been quite a lot of funding through the Rural Development Programme for regional schemes for BVD, both in England and Wales. So we have a very sound base from which to build the BVD-free scheme. And what the BVD-free scheme is going to bring is a level of coordination, but also a level of continuity to how we deal with BVD, because some of these initiatives have been quite stop-start, particularly the Rural Development Programme funded programs. And that's why we set up BVD-free scheme independently of any Rural Development Programme funding, so that it could continue outside of that and be owned by the industry and driven by the industry to achieve what we as an industry want to achieve together, which those 70 plus organizations have said we want to see BVD eliminated. It's not just enough to say that we'd like to see it eliminated, we need to all work together and we can achieve it. It is not something that's going to be easy, but it is something that we can achieve. And it is a drag on the cost of production for all cattle farmers. Those losses are mainly due to reproductive losses, either through early embryonic death, returns to service, abortion, resulting in increased calving interval and an increased number of services to conception. Another huge cost area is the secondary disease, which results from the immune suppression increasing the severity and the level of pneumonia and scar in calves and lameness and mastitis in adult cows. There are also production effects on milk yield and growth rates, and especially increased cull rates, which are usually due to poor fertility. Deaths from mucosal disease, but also more particularly from secondary infection, are also a feature of BVD. And much of this, the issue with BVD relates to the fact that BVD has evolved as a very clever way of maintaining itself within the cattle population. So if a cow is infected in the first 120 days of pregnancy, first 110 to 120 days of pregnancy, the calf is likely and cow are both become infected with the BVD virus. However, it's only the cow that becomes immune, so her immune system recognizes the virus as foreign. At that point, the calf's immune system is developing, and it thinks the virus is just a normal part of it. It's there, just the same way as my heart is there, my kidneys are there, therefore it must be normal. So it remains persistently infected, and the immune system does not recognize the virus. and those calves are then born persistently infected and are continuously shedding the virus and a source of infection to the rest of the herd. And this is one reason why great care is needed when you're buying in-calf animals, because you can test the cow, find that she has antibodies, and know that she's not persistently infected, but you can't tell anything about the calf that is going to be born from that cow until it's born. You can tag and test that calf at birth to check whether or not the calf that's born to an in-calf animal that you bought is persistently infected with BVD virus. So those animals that are persistently infected shed high quantities of BVD virus throughout their life, and they are generally the most significant source of infection to other cattle. Usually there's only 1 or 2 cattle that are persistently infected in every 100 animals in an infected herd, and many herds have already been exposed to the virus. Even if some of those have already eliminated the virus, many of those herds and other herds that haven't been exposed to the virus are at constant risk of the virus being reintroduced, either through buying in persistently infected animals. And the sad fact is that most people pay good money to buy the disease into their herds, but they can also get infection across the fence from neighboring farms or through coming into contact with infected animals at markets and shows. Sometimes you can tell PI animals by the fact that they have stunted growth and rough coats, but more frequently those animals appear perfectly normal. And that's often a difficulty for farmers when they, through testing, identify that an animal is persistently infected with the BVD virus, but the animal looks perfectly healthy, and we know that no one likes killing what looks like a perfectly healthy animal, but the truth is that every day that those animals stay on your farm, they're probably costing you more than they ever will return to you, even if they were to survive through to slaughter. So the weight that they gain each day is actually overcome by the risk that they pose to the rest of your herd and the infection they spread to the rest of your herd, resulting in the clinical effects that we discussed earlier, particularly the reproductive effects and the immunosuppression. Some of the work that's been done in Ireland by SAC estimated that the cost per cow in Ireland was 32 euros per suckler cow, and a total cost to the Irish national suckler herd of almost 30 million euros, and almost double that for the dairy herd, so almost 64 euros, 63 euros per cow for the dairy herd, and 71 million euros to the national cattle herd in Ireland. So over 100 million euros in total BVD has been costing the Irish cattle industry, and that doesn't include the stress and mental cost of BVD outbreaks to farm. In England, or in the UK, the costs estimated by Richard Bennett back in 2005-2006 was that it was somewhere between 25 and 61 million. So best estimate of around 50 million pounds per year BVD is costing the UK national cattle herd. And that's those losses that we talked about earlier with reproductive disorders in PI animals and the secondary infections from BVD infected animals. So as in the photograph on the slide, BVD casts a huge shadow over the cattle industry in the UK. And so that's why, as an industry, I think there's such strong support to move forward and try and eliminate BVD from the national cattle herd. So getting on then to the BVD free scheme, the core of the BVD free scheme is the BVD free charter, which is basically the terms and conditions of membership which farmers will sign on joining BVD free. And what that charter requires them to do is to actively engage in BVD control to eliminate the disease from their herd. And ultimately, what BVD Free will enable farms to do, or engaging with BVD Free, is actually to get rid of the virus from their farms. So even if they achieve nothing else, they will achieve the benefits of not having BVD in their farm. But by working together, we can achieve much more in the longer term, so that when we have eliminated the BVD virus from every herd in the country, we can reduce some of the costs then involved associated with prevention of BVD infection. What they also commit to do is reporting all BVD testing results from their herd to the national database, and then to allow the herd status and individual animal status to be openly accessible through the BVD Free database. So as in Scotland, you'll be able to go onto a web page, enter an animal's individual tag number. You could be standing in the market with your mobile phone, enter in the tag number and see, does it have a BVD free negative status? Has it been tested and was it negative, or has it not been tested and is it not covered by the BVD free program? No details about the farm name or about who owns the animal will be shown, just the fact of whether or not the animal or the herd is BVD free or not. And they also commit not to move persistently infected animals other than directly to slaughter, so that we don't simply move the problem on to somebody else. They can go through a dedicated red slaughter market, but otherwise they should move directly or through a red slaughter market to slaughter, so we don't spread the disease around the country. In terms of setting up a BVD-free program on a farm, it's a 4-step process, and the short mnemonic for that is ADAM: assess, define, action, monitor. And the first step is not actually testing. The first step is to assess the level of biosecurity and disease risk on the farm, then move on to define the BVD status of the herd, then work with your vet and other advisors to develop an action plan for the control of BVD on the farm. And finally, where BVD free comes into its own is coordination of monitoring progress through the annual status check, so that you're constantly updating the fact that your BVD status is negative. So in terms of assessing the biosecurity risk, this is a simple risk assessment matrix based on what they use in Ireland and Northern Ireland. So they talk about the 3 big B's: buying, boundaries, and borrowing. So generally the biggest risk is that you'll buy in BVD, and you need to look at how you can control that risk. And that's either by buying in animals whose status you know is negative before you buy them, or by isolating them and testing them when you do buy them before you add or mix them with the herd. And ideally, over the longer term, look at how you might move towards a closed herd. I'd say the biggest risk is probably other cattle bringing it onto your farm, either through buying or through across your boundaries. A tradition that goes back to Anglo-Saxon times is that of beating the bounds, and I think that used to be on Rogation Sunday. You'd go around and beat the bounds of the parish and check that the integrity of the boundary. And that's something we need to relearn and recheck on a regular basis, that our boundary, the integrity of our boundaries of the farm. The ideal situation is to have as with TB, to have a double fence around the property with a 3-meter gap. But we realize that's not going to be feasible on all properties. But it is maybe feasible to look at making sure you don't graze side by side with your neighbor, and try and organize that so that there's at least a field always between you and other cattle. The other way BVD can be introduced onto your farm is through what's called, under the generous term of borrowing, either through BVD contaminated equipment or BVD contaminated slurry. And we need to look at, and also visitors coming on your farm having contact with cattle potentially introducing BVD. And there are steps that you can take to actually reduce the risk. So that is the first step. Assess that. Assess your biosecurity. If it's not satisfactory, then seek advice and move to the next step when that is satisfactory. Then you're defining the herd status, which we'll come back to later. If there are no PEI animals, you need to develop your action plan. If there are PEI animals, then you need to screen for on your farm and find those PEI animals and remove them from the farm. And then in both cases, once you've put those action plans into place to move to the monitoring the progress on through your annual status check. So if you don't really know your herd status and you have a beef herd, what you need to do is test your young stock, and you can either do that through tag and test, or through blood sampling 10 calves, at least 10 calves, 9 to 18 months of age that aren't vaccinated. If those animals aren't vaccinated and there is BVD virus in the group, it will have spread, and one or more of those animals will have BVD antibodies, and you can tell that BVD virus is circulating in your herd. Because young stock in beef herds do tend to be mixed with the main herd, it's not essential to screen the adults. So if one of the adults is a persistently infected animal, it will be picked up through your blood sampling of the young stock. If you have a dairy herd, the same approach to testing your young stock, either through tag and test or blood sampling, applies. But because the young stock generally aren't held in close contact with the dairy herd, it's also recommended that you should test the milking herd. Either through, if they aren't vaccinated, you can use bulk milk test for the antibody. If they are vaccinated, you can either bulk antibody test pooled first lactation milk samples, or you can test the milk for antigen tests. So there are a range of options there for testing the herd. And then what BVD Free will do is it will assign herd and individual status. It's developed clear definitions for that. And we've been working to make sure there's mutual recognition of individual animal status across Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and ultimately of herd status as well. In terms of the individual status, if an animal has been individually tested free of BVD virus, it will be regarded as BVD virus test negative and very low risk. But we know you can have some false negatives, so it's, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that you might have a false negative, so you shouldn't always assume that they're entirely negative. We can also assume a negative status. So if we know that a cow that is persistently infected can never give birth to a calf that's negative. So if a calf is negative, by definition, its mother must be negative. And also if it can develop antibodies after 9 months of age, we know those aren't maternal antibodies, so it must be recognizing the virus. So we can also assume that it's negative. And that's a low risk, not as low risk as where you've done an individual test on the animal, but it is a good indication that the animal isn't persistently infected with BVD virus. And then the other two statuses are either persistently infected animals, or we don't know the status because they're not either tested or assumed negative. BVD Free will not assign a herd status in year 1 because we need 2 years of testing in a herd before we will assign herd status, except for checks accredited herds. That status will be recognized by BVD Free right from the 1st of July. So any herd that signs up for BVD Free that has a herd status will be accredited as BVD Free, show as checks accredited BVD Free with its expiry date on the database. One of the challenges with the BVD Free program is that we've had very limited funds, apart from the £60,000 per year put in by AHDB Beef and Lamb and AHDB Dairy. We've had no additional money, and that wasn't enough to build a database for the program. So we ran a market engagement exercise in March 2016, and we interviewed a panel. BVD Free put a panel in place which reviewed the tenders in April and identified XL Vet UK Limited as the preferred supplier. And they are being awarded a contract which basically gives them a concession to recover the costs from building the database and running a help desk from the upload of data to the database. And as I said earlier, you'll be able to either enter a tag number to check the BVD status of an individual animal, or enter a CPH number to check if it's got a herd status. In terms of the costs of uploading, those will be covered by the BVD Free program until October the 31st, 2016, so for the first 4 months, to encourage people to join early. Thereafter, it will be 25p per test result to upload virus antigen test results, and 50p per test to upload antibody test results. The reason for this being that if people are doing tag and test, they will generally be uploading far more results than people who are just doing the blood test approach. So to have a more equitable sharing of the costs of running the database across the program, we have a different cost for uploading the different type of test results. BVD Free has now been set up as a company limited by guarantee. The first 5 members are AHDB, BCVA, Cattle Information Services, Livestock Auctioneers Association, and National Beef Association. But we are going to be opening that up to any of the organizations who signed the Statement of Intent, because we want BVD Free to be owned by the industry, run by the industry. It should be a program of farmers, by farmers, for farmers, and that's the aim we want to get to. So it's been incorporated. Moving quickly on to communications, there will be a website going live on the 1st of July, providing all of the information about BVD. I've been working on creating a little book of BVD, which is basically an encyclopedic volume of everything to do with the BVD Free program. It's not something we intend to publish, but it's going to be there as a resource from which we develop other communications materials. We're developing advertising materials for BVD Free that any of the stakeholder organizations who are attending events and want to have banners or pull-ups there, they will be there for them. There's also the BVD Free supporter logo, which any company which has signed up to the statement or organization to the Statement of Intent can use to show their support for the scheme. We have developed a newsletter, and we're trying to develop a good communication for the program. And I better plug in at this stage. So we will looking to develop good channels of communication through all the stakeholders, and we'll be providing information to stakeholders and staff briefings so people can go out with confidence and tell people what BVD Free is all about, and also to build on all of those existing activities I talked about earlier, to work with the stakeholder organizations to build those into BVD Free. So if you've got any questions, want any more information, email bvdfree@ahdb.org.uk. And what we want all of this, or I would really love all those stakeholder organizations to do, is to identify their internal champions to BVD Free. I have said all along that when it is going to be a challenge to deliver BVD Free, but we are going to be relentlessly positive. We're going to make mistakes, we're going to admit them, we're going to learn from them, we're going to move on, and we're going to defy convention and dare to dream that we could actually do this. It's a program, as I said, for farmers, by farmers, on farms. I've said that we should have SMART goals. Eliminating BVD virus is something that's specific that we can do. It's a significant goal. And I've said that it's something that we should do, try and do within 1,000 days, get as many as possible herds signed up to BVD Free. It is measurable because we've got good tests, we've got a database, and it can make a meaningful difference. The Statement of Intent shows that everybody's agreed that it's something we should be doing. And from a technical perspective, we have great tests. We can do this. We could have done it last year. We could do it. We could have done it at any time in the last 5 years. So it's realistic and reasonable. And it's both the elimination itself is both tangible and trackable. So there are really good, smart, measurable objectives that we can do in terms of BVD Free. So I've always said that we will be totally open. So as with the Northern Ireland scheme, every month we will try and publish, how many tests have been uploaded to the database, how many herds have signed up to BVD Free, and are we on track to get 80 to 90% of the industry engaged in BVD Free in the first 1,000 days. So we've put that date already in the diary, 1,000 days from the 1st of July to the 28th of March 2019, and we'll have a meeting on that day, and you can either kick my ass because we haven't achieved it, or say, right, we've got to 90%, we need to move on and make it compulsory. And within that, then we have sub-targets for each year within the program that we really need to achieve if we're going to get to those final targets. So the launch is set for the 1st of July. There's going to be a press briefing in print on a farm in Derbyshire on the 24th of June. Many thanks to Fiona McGillivray for putting that plan together. The launch on the 1st of July is going to be a virtual launch. So any farm or any organization in the country can be part of the BVD Free launch simply by getting on Twitter and putting up photos and messages of support for BVD Free. And we're going to have a big presence at the livestock event on the 6th and 7th of July to get us off to a good start. And then a plan for regional activities over the autumn to try and get this message out as quickly as possible to the industry. So say on the 1st of July, if you want to get involved in the Twitter approach to promote the launch, this is how you can do it, by taking your photo with the BVD Free logo in the photo. I am trying to get a farmer selfie competition up and running, so putting £100 into the pot for the best farmer selfie on the day related to BVD Free. If you're tweeting, tweet that you're backing BVD Free and use the hashtag BVD Free. If you want any more information or want to know where you can get posters, banners or placards, email us on bvdfree@ahdb.org.uk. So coming to an end, so I thought I'd give the last word to Muhammad Ali, who sadly passed on this week. And some would say that getting to 90% of the industry engaged in a BVD Free voluntary program was impossible. But what Ali said was, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration, it's a dare. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. And that's our mantra for BVD Free as well. It is hard. When President Kennedy committed the US to putting a man on the moon by the end of the 60s, he said, we choose to do this and to do these other things, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And this eliminating BVD from the national herd is not going to be easy. It is going to be hard, but it is something we can do. It is something that this generation has sat on its hands for too long. It is something that this generation can do for the next generation. It can produce the next generation of cattle by 2022 that are completely free of BVD virus. And it can hand on to the next generation of farmers a national herd that is free of BVD. As to finish with Ali's other comment that I loved, the best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up. And we all, as organizations and as a generation that have sat around talking about doing something about BVD for far too long, need to wake up and actually do something. This is something we can actually achieve. It's not impossible, but we need to all work together. It's not something, I don't want people coming to me and saying, you haven't made this happen. We all need to do our bit in making BVD freedom a reality. So now I've said my bit, and it's over to you.